The shouting starts before the sun is even fully up. Her father's voice rips through the small Ohio house, wild and confused, calling names that do not belong to this time. Margaret rushes down the hallway in her worn slippers, heart pounding, one hand on the wall to steady herself. She finds him in the living room, eyes wide, trying to push the coffee table away as if it were a stranger. For a moment, she forgets to breathe, feeling the familiar terror press against her chest. She speaks his name slowly, carefully, like she is approaching a frightened animal. His eyes flicker toward her, then away, trapped in some memory she cannot reach. She touches his shoulder, feeling the bones sharper than last month, the skin thinner than last year. The old clock on the wall keeps ticking, steady and indifferent to their chaos. She wonders, not for the first time, how many more mornings like this her body and soul can take. He calls her by her mother's name, and something inside her cracks again. Every time it happens, she feels both honored and invisible at the same time. She guides him back to the couch, talking softly about nothing, as if words alone could mend broken pathways in his mind. Her back aches as she helps him sit, a reminder of all the days and nights she has carried him. She keeps her face calm, but her hands tremble slightly as she tucks the blanket around his legs. The nurse was supposed to come twice a week, but the last visit was cancelled without explanation. There is always a reason, always a form, always a waiting list, always one more thing she must handle alone. The bills lie stacked on the kitchen table, half opened, whispering threats she refuses to read at this hour. Outside, a neighbor's car engine starts, and life continues for people who still have schedules and choices. Margaret feels the distance between their world and hers like a physical wall. Her phone buzzes with a notification she ignores. Friends from her old job still send the occasional message, invitations to lunches she never attends. At first, she tried to explain about her father, about the appointments and the unpredictable nights. Eventually, the invitations grew fewer, and her replies became shorter, until silence felt easier. Now, the phone is just another object that reminds her of a life she no longer recognizes. She moves into the kitchen and starts the coffee, measuring grounds with mechanical precision. Every movement is a small ritual of survival, a way to make the morning feel controllable. She glances at the calendar, filled with notes in her careful handwriting, doctor visits, medication refills, insurance calls. There are no notes that belong only to her, no plans that hold her name alone. A quiet ache spreads through her chest as she realizes she cannot remember the last time she did something just because she wanted to. From the living room, her father's voice softens into a low murmur. She leans against the counter, closes her eyes, and lets one deep breath shake its way out. The house feels too full of responsibility and too empty of anything else. A thought rises that she usually shoves away quickly. She is disappearing, piece by piece, into this role. Today, for the first time, she does not fully manage to push that thought back down. Margaret pulls the heavy door up, wincing as the metal groans in protest. She told herself she would tackle this mess for months, but there was always another crisis to handle. Now the unpaid bills have cornered her into action, pushing her to find things she can sell. She stands in the doorway for a moment, overwhelmed by the chaos of stacked boxes and leaning tools. She starts with the nearest pile, dragging out cardboard boxes that sag at the corners. Inside, she finds winter coats that no longer fit, rusty lamps, and faded Christmas decorations. Every object seems to carry a memory, and every memory slows her down. She makes a small pile for donation, another for trash, and a third for anything that might bring a few dollars. Her hands move, but her mind keeps drifting to her father asleep in his recliner inside. In the back corner, half hidden behind an old lawnmower, she spots a box that looks different. It is smaller, sturdier, with a strip of worn floral tape across the top. Her heart gives a strange little jolt, the way it does when a familiar song plays unexpectedly. She kneels and pulls it toward her, feeling the weight of dust and time. There is no label, no hint of what waits inside, only a tug of curiosity she cannot explain. For a moment, she hesitates, fingers resting on the lid. She has learned to move quickly through tasks, not to linger, not to feel too much. But something about this box makes her slow down, makes her careful. Her breathing changes, shallow and uneven, as if her body anticipates something her mind has not yet named. She lifts the lid with a care that feels almost sacred. Inside, she sees the soft shape of brushes, their bristles stiff with age. There are tubes of paint, some cracked, some still holding faint traces of color. A sketchbook lies on top, its cover scuffed, its edges curled, like it has been opened and closed hundreds of times. The sight hits her like a wave, because she knows immediately whose things these were. These are the remains of her mother's dream, packed away and left to sleep. Her fingers trace the edge of the sketchbook without opening it. The garage around her fades, and she is suddenly 17 again, watching her mother paint by the kitchen window. She remembers the smell of turpentine, the way light fell across unfinished canvases. She remembers the arguments too, the talk of practicality, of real jobs, of sacrifices that needed to be made. She remembers promising herself she would never abandon the things that made her feel alive. She sits back on the cold garage floor, the box between her knees. Dust motes dance in the thin beam of light cutting through the high window. Her throat tightens with a mixture of longing and regret she thought time had buried. There is a life inside this box, both her mother's and perhaps her own, waiting in stillness. For the first time in a long time, Margaret feels something other than exhaustion stirring inside her. Margaret carries the box into the house like it might fall apart if she breathes too hard. She sets it gently on the dining table, pushing aside a stack of medical forms. Her father snores softly in the living room, a low, steady sound that feels strangely distant. The afternoon light slants across the table, catching the dust in the air. For a moment, she just stands there, hands resting on the back of a chair, afraid to move. Slowly, she sits and opens the box again, lifted by an invisible thread of memory. This time, she takes the sketchbook out and holds it with both hands. The cover is worn smooth in places where fingers once lingered again and again. She exhales shakily and opens to the first page, feeling as if she is stepping into a room that has been locked for years. The paper sighs in protest, but the lines on it are still clear. Her mother's drawings stare back at her, full of life and unfinished possibilities. There are quick studies of hands, of faces, of flowers in mason jars. Some pages hold only the first tentative lines of a scene, interrupted by responsibilities or fatigue. Margaret feels a burn behind her eyes as she recognizes certain details from their old house. These are pieces of a woman who always seemed torn between duty and desire. She remembers evenings when her mother would start to set up her paints, then stop. A phone call, a bill, a late shift, some urgent need always pulled her away. Margaret watched her tuck frustration behind a tired smile, saying maybe tomorrow, maybe another day. She did not understand then how heavy those maybes could become. Now, years later, she feels the same weight pressing down on her own shoulders. Her gaze falls on a blank page near the back of the sketchbook. There is a faint pencil mark, a circle, like the beginning of something that never had the chance to appear. She brushes her thumb over it, feeling a strange echo inside her chest. It is as if this empty space is waiting for a story, waiting for someone to continue the line. The silence in the room grows thick with questions she has avoided for decades. She notices one page with a small note in the corner, written in her mother's looping script. The words are simple, a reminder about buying more blue paint, but they hit her like a message from another time. She hears her mother's voice in her mind, warm and focused, talking about shades of sky and water. She remembers the pride in her eyes when Margaret once drew something at school and showed it to her. For a brief, stinging moment, she feels like a daughter again instead of only a caretaker. Her eyes drift toward the hallway where her father rests. The house feels like a bridge between past and present, both of them heavy with unfinished dreams. She closes the sketchbook gently, holding it against her chest. Her heart beats faster, not from panic this time, but from a fragile, unfamiliar sense of possibility. She realizes that simply opening this book has changed something inside her, even if she cannot name it yet. That night, the house finally grows quiet. Her father has one of his calmer evenings, drifting into sleep after dinner without much confusion. Margaret moves through the rooms on tiptoe, as if any sound might shatter the fragile peace. The sketchbook waits on the dining table, patient and still. She feels its presence like a whisper, calling her name. She rummages through the box until she finds a small set of watercolor pens still sealed. They must have been bought and never used, a promise her mother never had time to keep. Her hands tremble slightly as she peels back the plastic, revealing colors that shine softly in the dim light. The simple act of opening them feels like crossing some invisible line. She lays out an old mug for water and a worn brush beside it. For a few long minutes, she only stares at the blank sheet of paper before her. Every doubt she has ever collected seems to wake up all at once. "You are too old, you are too tired, you have no right," they whisper inside her mind. She thinks of the bills, of the medications, of tomorrow's appointments. The world of practical worries presses against her, heavy and demanding. But then she remembers the unfinished circle in her mother's sketchbook. She remembers the way her heart lifted when she saw those lines, fragile yet defiant. A small voice inside her, gentler than the others, suggests that maybe this is not selfish. Maybe this is a way to breathe when everything else feels like drowning. She listens to that voice, for once, and it guides her hand forward. She dips the brush into the water and then into a pool of blue. The pigment blooms on the bristles, rich and deep, like captured sky. Her pulse races as she brings the brush to the paper, hand hovering for a final moment. Then, slowly, she draws the first stroke across the blank surface. The line is shaky, imperfect, but undeniably alive. Something loosens in her chest as she watches the color spread. The paper absorbs it, leaving edges that feather gently, like breath on frosted glass. She adds another stroke, then another, letting instinct guide her instead of judgment. Time begins to blur at the edges, the ticking of the clock fading into background noise. For the first time in years, she is not thinking about what she must do next. When she finally sits back, the small painting is far from perfect. The shapes are uncertain, the colors uneven, the composition unsure of itself. Yet she feels a warmth spreading through her that she cannot remember feeling for a very long time. This scrap of paper holds a piece of her that has been locked away. She realizes she has taken a step she cannot easily undo, and the thought terrifies and excites her. Morning comes too quickly, dragging responsibility back into every corner of the house. Margaret wakes with a dull ache behind her eyes and the faint memory of colored shapes. The painting from the night before lies on the dining table, edges curling as it dries. She pauses in the doorway, torn between pride and embarrassment at the sight of it. Her father's cough from the bedroom snaps her back into motion. The day starts in a rush of medications, phone calls, and reheated coffee. Her father is more confused today, asking about people who died many years ago. She answers gently, choosing which truths to bend in order to protect him. Each question slices into her, reminding her how much of him she has already lost. Somewhere under all that, a new worry forms. Did she steal energy from him to give to herself? As she loads dishes into the sink, her mind flits back to the brush in her hand. She hears an internal voice accusing her of selfishness, of wasting time on something frivolous. There are always more urgent things, always more practical needs that should come first. She imagines what people would say if they saw her painting while everything else still feels unstable. The shame curls through her like smoke, making it hard to stand up straight. She walks past the painting and turns it face down without looking. The gesture feels like a punishment, like scolding a child for daring to dream. Her chest tightens with a familiar mix of resentment and resignation, directed mostly at herself. She tells herself it was a silly experiment, a late-night weakness she cannot afford to repeat. There is comfort in returning to the role she understands, even if it hurts. Later, while her father naps in his chair, she sits at the table with a stack of bills. The numbers blur as she tries to make them fit into a reality that does not bend. Payment plans, final notices, and medical statements form a heavy fortress of obligation. She presses her thumb and forefinger against the bridge of her nose, fighting off another headache. Behind the pile of envelopes, the corner of the sketchbook peeks out like a secret. Her gaze lingers on that edge of worn cardboard, and her breathing changes. She remembers the feeling of the brush moving across the paper, shaky but free. She remembers the way the world faded for a brief moment, leaving only color and motion. Even now, with worry weighing her down, a tiny part of her longs to feel that again. That longing scares her almost as much as the unpaid bills do. As evening falls, her body feels leaden from a day of caretaking and quiet panic. She helps her father into bed, smoothing the blanket and kissing his forehead. Standing in the doorway to his room, she is flooded with both deep love and crushing fatigue. She knows she will get up and do all of this again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Yet somewhere beneath the exhaustion, something new keeps pulsing softly, refusing to disappear. The house is dim and quiet except for the rhythmic hiss of the humidifier in her father's room. Margaret sits on the hallway floor, back against the wall, feeling the weight of the day crush her shoulders. She didn't mean to cry tonight, but the tears come anyway, hot and silent. It feels like the universe keeps asking more from her than she has left to give. She whispers, I'm so tired, to no one at all. Her father calls out once, confused and half asleep, and she wipes her face quickly. She goes to him, soothing him with soft words. She barely has the strength to speak. When he settles, she stands for a long moment watching his chest rise and fall. The love is there, deep and unwavering, but tonight it feels tangled with fear. Fear of losing him, and fear of losing herself while trying to save him. She returns to the dining table and stares at the sketchbook. It's closed, but it feels alive, like something waiting to be touched. She hesitates only a second before opening it, letting the pages fall where they may. Her eyes land on one unfinished flower her mother once drew, one soft shape, one forgotten line. Without thinking, she picks up a pencil. Her hand moves almost on its own, shaky but determined. She adds a single petal to the flower, small and imperfect, then another, and suddenly she's breathing easier. She pulls out the watercolor set again. Her heart beats faster, but not from panic this time. She mixes a pale yellow and lets it flow into the petals she just sketched. It blooms gently, like morning light entering a room. The simplicity of it calms her. Minutes pass, or maybe hours. She paints until the ache in her chest loosens. The colors feel like a language she forgot she could speak. The house is still, almost kind for once. She lets the silence hold her. When she finally stops, the small drawing glows faintly on the page. It isn't great. It isn't even good. But it is real. It is hers. And that alone changes something she cannot ignore. The morning light feels softer than usual as it slips through the blinds. Margaret yawns, stretches, and feels a ghost of last night's peace settle over her. Her father is in a better mood today, humming a tune she hasn't heard in years. She watches him for a moment, grateful for the brief calm. Small mercies matter. Later, she carries out the trash and sees Linda watering her flowers next door. Linda is cheerful, warm, the kind of woman who always smells like lavender. They talk about the weather, about the neighborhood, about nothing at all. Margaret almost turns to go inside when a strange impulse stops her. "Can I show you something?" she asks. She brings out the sketchbook, feeling her palms sweat. This is foolish, she thinks. It's childlike. It's nothing. But Linda takes the book gently, with genuine curiosity in her eyes. She flips through the pages slowly, carefully. Then she smiles. "Oh, Margaret, this is beautiful." The words land softly, like feathers settling on a still pond. Margaret searches her face for any hint of politeness or pity. There is none, only sincerity, and something warm moves through her. They sit on the porch for a few minutes, talking about art. Linda mentions a community class held at the local center. "It's really friendly," she says. "No pressure." The idea feels both terrifying and electric. Margaret nods but doesn't commit. When she returns inside, she places the sketchbook on the table. It looks different now, less like a secret and more like a beginning. Her father calls for her from the living room. Duty returns, steady and real. But something new walks beside it now. All afternoon, she thinks about Linda's smile, about the class, about the possibility of stepping out of her routine for 1 hour a week. It feels daring, almost rebellious, but she can't stop imagining it. The day unravels quickly. Her father wakes confused and restless, pacing the hallway. He knocks over a lamp, then forgets why he is upset. Margaret tries to calm him, but her own nerves fray with every minute. By noon, she feels like she's been through a battle. The phone rings twice from the doctor's office. More appointments, more adjustments to medication, more warnings about the progression of his condition. She writes everything down numbly, her hand shaking a little. Nothing feels steady anymore. A social worker calls next, offering a pamphlet of options she can't afford. Margaret listens, polite but defeated. She closes her eyes as the woman talks, imagining color instead of numbers, brushstrokes instead of bills, peace instead of panic. When her father finally naps, she sinks into the couch. Her body aches everywhere, neck back, even her jaw. She covers her face with her hands and lets out one long, trembling breath. The house is too quiet now, too still. Her gaze drifts to the dining table where the sketchbook sits. A thought whispers, "Paint." Immediately, guilt lunges forward, sharp and quick. How can she think of herself at a time like this? But the thought doesn't vanish. She picks up the sketchbook anyway. Her hands move with a mix of desperation and longing. She paints fast, not caring if it's good, only needing the release. Colors flood the page, messy, bold, emotional. It feels like screaming without sound. When she stops, she feels lighter, not fixed, not healed, but steadier, like she can stand up again, like she can breathe. A week passes before she gathers the courage to visit the community center. Linda's gentle nudges help, as do the restless thoughts that follow Margaret everywhere. She drives slowly, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Her heart thumps against her ribs as she parks the car. She almost turns around twice. Inside, the center is bright and filled with quiet chatter. She walks past rooms hosting dance classes, tutoring sessions, knitting groups. Life is happening here in small, beautiful ways. She wonders when her own life stopped feeling like this. Then she finds the art room. The door is open. People sit around a long table covered with palettes and jars. Their faces are relaxed, focused, no tension, no judgment, just creation. She doesn't go in, not yet. Instead, she stands in the doorway, watching the flow of color across paper. The instructor moves softly between students, offering guidance. It feels like a world she once belonged to. A woman with silver hair glances at her and smiles. "Are you joining us?" she asks kindly. Margaret's throat tightens. Not today, she thinks, but she whispers, maybe next time. She stays another minute, soaking in the atmosphere. Just breathing it in feels like medicine. On her way out, she grabs a schedule from a bulletin board. Her hands tremble, but not from fear alone. There is excitement too. When she returns home, her father is asleep. The house feels different tonight, less suffocating, more spacious somehow, as if possibility followed her back. 1 week later, she stands again at the threshold of the art room. This time, she doesn't turn away. Her pulse races, but her feet carry her forward. She chooses an empty seat on the far end of the table. Her hands are cold. The instructor, a man named Paul, greets her warmly. "Welcome, Margaret," he says, as if her presence truly matters here. He gives her a simple set of supplies. Nothing fancy, nothing intimidating. She looks around the table. People of all ages work quietly, lost in their own worlds. No one is watching her. No one expects perfection. It feels safe. She dips her brush into water, then into a soft green. The paint touches the paper, forming a trembling line. Her breath catches, but she keeps going. One line, then another. Paul pauses behind her, observing without speaking. After a moment, he nods gently. "You have a light touch," he says. A small comment, but it hits deep. Margaret paints for the full hour. Sometimes she freezes, sometimes she feels almost brave. Her work is uneven, unsure, but growing, like a seed pushing through soil. When class ends, she packs her things slowly. She feels drained, but in a sweet way, like she's used a part of herself long neglected. As she walks out, Paul says, "Hope to see you next week," and she realizes she wants that too. The morning starts quietly, with a pale light settling over the kitchen tiles. Margaret brews coffee, moving slowly, feeling yesterday's worries clinging to her skin. Her father seems calmer today, sitting by the window with a blanket over his knees. She watches him for a moment, marveling at how fragile he looks. It scares her more than she admits. While she cleans the counter, he calls her by name. Not her mother's name, her real name, clear and steady. Her breath stops. She kneels beside him, heart thundering. He touches her cheek with a trembling hand. "I know you," he whispers, voice thin but sure. For a heartbeat, time freezes. Then the moment begins to slip. He drifts again, eyes clouding over as quickly as they had cleared. The recognition vanishes, swallowed by the fog of his illness, but the echo of it remains inside her. A tiny miracle, a tiny heartbreak. Margaret sits with him long after he falls asleep. She holds his hand, warm but weightless, as if it belongs to another world. Tears slip down her cheeks, quiet and unforced. She doesn't try to wipe them away. She just lets herself feel. Later, she opens her sketchbook. She flips through the pages slowly, stopping at the unfinished flower. Then she turns to a blank page. Something inside her knows exactly what to do next. She begins sketching her father's face. Every line feels like both a goodbye and a promise. The shadows under his eyes, the curve of his jaw, the softness of age. She draws with reverence, capturing not just appearance, but memory. It hurts, but it also heals. When she finally stops, her hands ache and her heart feels raw. The drawing is rough, imperfect, but full of truth. She knows she will turn it into a full painting soon. Something deep inside her insists on it. This is a piece of him she wants to keep. That night, she settles at the dining table with her paint spread wide. The house is quiet except for the soft whir of the heater. Her father sleeps deeply, giving her rare, uninterrupted time. She stares at the sketch until her courage ignites. Then, she begins. She starts with the background, gentle washes of muted blue. The color settles like mist around the outline of his face. She mixes browns and grays to capture the warmth of his skin. Her brush moves slowly at first. Then, with more resolve, hours pass unnoticed. She adds shadows under his eyes, softening them with care. She darkens the creases around his mouth, honoring the years they represent. Every stroke brings emotion with it, love, exhaustion, grief, and something like peace. She pauses often, letting the image speak to her. It feels like a conversation with the part of him that still remembers her, a conversation they couldn't have in words anymore. She paints the small wrinkle near his eyebrow, the one that appears when he's confused. There is a moment when she almost stops. The weight of the truth feels too heavy. Her hand trembles, and a line forms where it shouldn't. But instead of panicking, she blends it, turning mistake into meaning, just as she has done in life. When she finally paints the eyes, everything shifts. They look soft, tired, but unmistakably his. Margaret leans back, breath trembling, feeling something inside her realign. This is him, and this is her love, made visible. She sits in silence for a long while after the last stroke dries. The portrait glows gently in the warm lamplight. It feels like more than art. It feels like truth. And she realizes she has found her purpose again. Margaret carries the portrait to her next community class, heart pounding. She doesn't plan to show it, but she can't leave it behind either. Paul notices the canvas immediately when she walks in. "May I?" he asks. She nods, terrified. He studies the painting for a long time, not speaking, not rushing, just absorbing every detail. Finally, he smiles, an honest, startled smile. "You have something rare here." The room quiets as a few students approach. They look at the portrait with soft awe, whispering small reactions. Margaret's cheeks burn with embarrassment. She almost apologizes for bringing it, but Paul stops her. "There's a local exhibition next month," he says gently. "Small, intimate, community-focused." He pauses, waiting for her eyes to meet his. "I think your work belongs there." Her breath catches. She shakes her head instinctively. No, she could never. It's too much, too public, too vulnerable. But the idea sinks its hooks in quickly, and it glows. Paul assures her the event is simple, supportive, welcoming. "Just a chance to share your voice," he says. Margaret swallows hard, because that word voice hits deep. She hasn't felt like she had one in years, maybe longer. Driving home later, she keeps glancing at the portrait. It sits in the back seat like a companion. She feels both exhilarated and terrified, but there is no denying it now. She wants this. The community hall is warm and buzzing with soft conversations. Paintings line the walls, glowing under gentle lights. Margaret stands near her space, twisting her hands nervously. Her portrait of her father hangs at eye level. It looks braver than she feels. People wander by, pausing, leaning closer, whispering. Some nod slowly, as if understanding something unspoken. Margaret watches them carefully, heart fluttering. No one laughs, no one dismisses it. A young woman approaches her with teary eyes. "Your painting, it reminds me of my grandfather," she says. The words hit Margaret like a warm wave, soft, deep. They talk for a moment, sharing quiet stories of caregiving and loss. To strangers, bound by tenderness and grief, Margaret realizes her pain is not a small thing, and not a lonely thing. It has meaning. Paul passes by, giving her a proud nod. A few other artists introduce themselves. Someone asks if she has more work. She blushes, shaking her head shyly. But inside, something shines. As the night goes on, Margaret relaxes. Her shoulders lower, her breathing steadies. She feels present, awake in a way she hasn't felt in years. Like a woman stepping back into her own skin. Finally, at the end of the event, she stands in front of the portrait alone. She touches the frame gently. "This is real," she whispers. Not just the painting, but the part of her it awakened. The next morning, sunlight pours softly into the kitchen. Margaret makes breakfast with a lightness she hasn't felt in a decade. Her father sits nearby, humming again. She watches him with tender eyes. Everything feels different. She knows his condition will continue to change. She knows the challenges aren't gone, but she also knows she is stronger now. and not because she's endured, because she's rediscovered herself. She sets up a small art corner by the window. Nothing fancy, just brushes, paper, and a jar for water. It feels like a promise, simple and sacred, a space that belongs only to her, a space she deserves. Linda visits that afternoon with cookies. They talk about the exhibition, laughing softly. Margaret feels connected, rooted, seen. Something she feared she had lost forever, something she will not give up again. That night, after her father falls asleep, she paints, not for escape, not for proof, but for joy. Real joy. She finishes, a small landscape, quiet hills, soft sky. She signs her name in the corner. For the first time, she means it. This is her life, and she chooses it. Margaret closes the sketchbook gently. She feels steady, brave, open to whatever tomorrow brings. Rebuilding hasn't been easy, but it has been real. And she knows now, it's never too late to return to yourself, never too late to become who you are meant to be.